Okay, so thanks everyone for being here. This is our third workshop for the series of 4. So we've looked at feedback in ePortfolios. We looked last time at digital ethics, and now we're switching back to authentic assessment. So linking real world, whatever, we will have a discussion about what authentic is, but we're going to talk about how you can use authentic assessment in your ePortfolios. So thanks, Shari. This is a brief outline of where we will be spending the hour and a half together. So we don't want you to listen to us talking all the time. So we've added a few polls where you can find that it'll appear on your screen. Shari will put it up and you'll be able to answer a question or two, and then we'll talk about that. We've got 3 main sections of content, I guess. Section 1, what is authentic assessment? 2, transforming your assessment in ePortfolios in particular, so they're more authentic. And then Shari in the last section has got some really nice examples of how she has designed with academics some authentic assessment across courses and programs. So that's, and we'll have one group activity. So please, I know the digital ethics workshop I did with Professor Christine Brown-Wilson, there was some feedback about people having English as an additional language, and I definitely understand that as a challenge. Shari and I don't want you to feel underconfident or nervous on our behalf. We're very fortunate, we're speaking in our first language, but if I had to speak in your language, I wouldn't feel confident. So please have a go, is what we would say in Australia. Have a go and say something or contribute something, and please don't feel that we would embarrass you in any way by doing that. So we're just encouraging you to have a go. So we will be doing one group activity. It's a fairly easy activity in a way for a group. It's not a complicated one, but we would like you to join a small group and contribute in whatever way you want to that. And we'll talk about that as we get along further. So thanks, Shari. Let's move on. Okay, so learning outcomes, we've had more in the past, but there's 2 key ones for today. And we want to impart to you, I guess, the value of authentic assessment for a number of reasons. And we'll talk about that as we go. But obviously for students learning to be professionals or active citizens, they need to be prepared for the types of roles that they are actually going to undertake. And there are ways in pedagogies and curriculum that we can add value in assessment tasks and preparing for them to help the students be more equipped for what they're going to do, not only in study, but for later. So that's part of the overall value of why we spend time and efforts making assessment more authentic. We'd like you then to turn that to your own practice and perhaps consider a way or evaluate a way or 2 that you might not be familiar with that you'd like to include authentic assessment in your own ePortfolio practice. So we're putting it out there. We've learned a few things as we've prepared, and we would like you to sort of consider an open mind that you might add something into your practice. So the first poll is, I saw coming up, what would you like to learn from this workshop? And the options might come up.
Oh no, it's not linking. Bear with me.
Well, no worries.
Yeah, you know what? It's not in here. I'm sorry, I don't know where the poll is. I have created them.
Okay, so
let's just ask in the chat.
Yeah, let's in the chat. So just one key thing that you would like to learn from this workshop.
And let me give you some ideas. Perhaps you're thinking you would like to learn how definition of authentic assessment, perhaps examples of authentic assessment, how to design authentic assessment, benefits of using, why we should use authentic assessment, or maybe in particular how you might include that in your teaching, how to include that in your project or in your teaching. So yeah, thanks, Christine. In the chat.
Yeah, so Ray's already put in assessment tools. So yes, there are a different set of assessment tools that you can use. We will be talking about some of them. Rubrics. I guess we'll mention that briefly, but we did have a big discussion actually while we were preparing about how big to make the topic. And we had information in about learning objectives and rubrics and that, but we felt that we'd stick just mainly to authentic assessment, as in how, when, and why you'd use it. But we're very open if you would like to have a workshop or something hands-on about developing rubrics or developing learning outcomes. I'm sure we're very happy to do that with you. Yes, rationale, why would we use it?
Yeah, good.
Techniques, strategies, excellent. Okay, so I think
Great.
we'll be right. I think we're on track there. But
Yeah,
if you have
yeah.
something that you want that we aren't talking about, please put that in the chat or in the question time and ask us about it. Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, so I hinted at this just a minute ago.
Sorry.
That's okay. Authentic assessment. Why? What is it? Why should we use it? And when should we use it? And I found it really useful. In the next slide, this is the principles of assessment EQ. So you're probably aware that when you design or redesign an assessment task, there's certain principles that you would guide by from literature and evidence and pedagogy, etc. And I thought I'd just put up the UQ ones. I'm not saying they're the best in the world, but we have found them very useful. So they're available on the web. There's the link down the bottom there. So if you want to use any of these or ponder over them, they're just a stimulus for you. But when we're talking about authentic assessment, these still come into play. So authenticity is part of this. So it should be a developmental activity for the students, or authentic assessment. That's what we're aiming for, not something just flashy because we're good at doing it. It's got to have a reason. You need to be careful around the fact that the students need to be active in this, and so it's their responsibility. So that constructivism approach, they're responsible for their learning just as much as you as the educator designing. We use criterion referenced rubrics and marking, not bell curve, and I think we might have mentioned that in one of the other weeks. So basically it's a standards, criteria and standards approach. Transparent, the student should know what they're actually being asked to do, so the expectations on what to actually do and how they'll be marked. Credible, obviously sound, fair, equitable, purposeful and professional, so that's partly authentic, bringing that in, you know, the professional. But the last one about sustainable and workable for us is really important. It's about the student's workload. So sometimes and if you go to the next slide, thanks, Shari, sometimes people think that assessment that's authentic is going to be very involved and it's going to take a lot of work and all of this. Now, it might be true, but you've got to think about the workload for the student and the workload for yourself. And I think that's an important consideration when we come to this. So I have spent a bit of time looking at definitions of authentic assessment, and there's many. And I like this one because it talks about authentic assessment as a term, as an umbrella term. So we could use it in different ways. So when you're talking to somebody or working with someone and they have a bit of a different view, it could be the same thing. We're just coming at a different aspect or an element. So it covers several important pedagogical strategies that seek to immerse the learner in environments where they gain highly practical, lifelong learning skills. So you often hear the thing, authentic assessment is real world, 21st century skill learning, which I've done workshops on that for other colleagues in Southeast Asia, because I think that you have come to grips with that perhaps more than some of us, in the sense of we have to train our students to have these skills. So authentic assessment comes into that development of those lifelong learning skills. Thanks, Shari. Now, this is a very text-heavy kind of slide, but it comes from a paper which we put in the resource list and we will send to Shari. It's an older one, Gulliker et al. 2004, but I liked it because it explains two different cultures. Now, I'm not actually saying good, bad, it's not right, wrong type of thing, but it does explain the differences between, on the left, the testing culture, where we have rote learning, memorization. Nothing wrong necessarily with memorization. I mean, we're glad that doctors memorize all the procedures, and the pharmacist, the chemist knows all the medications and all of that, and children know times tables and all. So there is rote learning. But what this is saying is it's a culture. So we always might be using rote learning without looking at other ways. It comes also around standardized testing. So, you're looking for a way to evaluate. It could actually be for the institution itself, or it could be across cohorts of students, but the standardization. So we're not allowing the interpretation, performance, collaborative, you can see on the other side, where students are free to answer as they would like. The tasks are often decontextualized. So from that, we mean they're not real world, they're not lifelong skill learning, they're just, this is the task. No context around that of how you might use it. Whereas in authentic assessment, they're contextualized. And you'll see that a little bit as Shari points out some of the scenarios or case studies or problem-based learning or stuff like that you might be doing. Then we come to a difference between low-level cognition skills. So it just means that if you're familiar with higher order cognition skills and low level would be just understand, comprehend, describe, outline, illustrate. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if that's where your students are at in the level of their education. You've got to start somewhere, but it means in this idea that that's all we really do. We're not pushing the students to have those higher order things like evaluate, synthesize, apply, a whole lots of verbs you could use to describe that, which as professionals they will need. So we need to push them into using and learning these other skills. Someone mentioned last week about multiple choice format. I don't have a problem with that. There's a place for multiple choice format, but it's not necessarily all the time. And I know why educators use that. I get a lot of reasons why. And sometimes students just have to tell us their knowledge. They just have to tell us, I know this. But we don't want to leave the students just in that lower level kind of thinking skills. We want to push them again into alternative formats. And I can see that Ray put in something in the chat there about reflective things. Well, obviously reflection is another part of a skill that's pushing students up higher in what they're doing. So instead of just describing it, now they've got to think about the reflection of whatever you're choosing. What did it mean to do that? How could I apply that? So you're pushing them to actually think about applications or analysis about their own skill levels or whatever. So yes, I would say that's pushing authentic to authentic.
Christine, can I jump in there? So
yes.
I'm just with Ray with the reflective essay report. I think it depends on what kind of level of reflection you want them to achieve, as Christine touched on. So it depends on, I'm going to show you a structure that helps students dive deeper into that more higher order thinking reflection, a critical reflection where they reconstruct or reimagine future practice. And so it depends on your questions and your prompts. I think that can really help.
Thanks, Shari. So we're also introducing, I guess, which may not be new to many of you, is that we need to have lots of touch points or formative things for students to check in that they're progressing and not just hit them with the exam. Here it is. I haven't really prepared you too well. We're just going to give you one option. So a mixture, we would suggest, of the two. Last one there, used to rank student performance. That's, to me, is competition from students. And sometimes there's a place for that. You've only got certain allocations of awards, or you've got places for higher education. Of course, you'll be ranking students, but that can preoccupy students into competing against each other. So that becomes very difficult in authentic assessment because they can't collaborate because they're always thinking about their own ends. There's also equity issues around that. If you do use, you know, the bell curving with only so many students can get an A and B and C, so you're locking them in. We would tend to, in our education system, to be focusing on this students being responsible for their own learning, focusing on that learning process and the development of their competency. So quite a lot in there, but it really, so all of that comes from that Gallagher's et al. 2004 paper. And it's just a useful way to sort of describe the two different cultures that we're talking about. Thanks, Shari. So why should we use authentic assessment? Sounds like a lot of work. Well, not necessarily, but we're really looking at it from the student's point of view now. So it has strengths. A clear alignment of learning outcomes, learning activities and assessment tasks. Well, you're familiar with that probably from John Biggs' constructive alignment model, that all curriculum should be like that. But it does make it very clear that you're preparing the learning outcomes of what you want students to achieve. So that final outcome, the ways you're preparing them to actually do the assessment task, and then what they're doing in the task. So it becomes a nice, clear alignment. Something you might see in the other slides we've done on ePortfolios, both the process and the final product are important. So if you had your rubric and you're going to bother to do authentic assessment, you would be testing some sort of process as well. So your rubric would have something in it about the process, whatever that might be, whether it's teamwork, cognitive analysis, whatever. So that would be part of it, but then the product is also part of it. And ePortfolios do that really nicely, because that's, you know, you can see the process very clearly as well as the product. It's not a single solution. So this you've got to watch if you're marking, of course, because you're going to get a variety of outcomes. So you're going to have the students being more active in their assessment, in taking a responsibility for that. And so this idea of surface learning and deep learning, which is also from Biggs and Tang, I believe, that we want our students to be deep learners. So therefore, that's going to have implications for what we expect out of the assessment task. They're going to have their own flavour to them. Shari will talk a little, I just skipped down to the industry expert or teacher. So it can be suited very well to self and peer assessment, and she'll give examples of that. And as I've mentioned, we use rubrics for this because it is more complicated, I suppose, because of that flexibility and variety in response, and to make sure the students have a clear understanding of the marking. That comes out of a paper that I wrote with Peter Rutherford, a colleague. Couldn't find, it seems to have gone from online, but I will load it up again, and so that you can have access to having a look at it. It's just a very easier paper to understand that we wrote for the university. Okay, so when to use it, is that next, Shari?
Yes.
Okay, when should we use this? Well, I would say we should expect to see it at all levels over your curriculum. So if you have a program that consists of 10 courses, we should be thinking about authentic assessment as a principle across that program. Now, obviously that varies in complexity. So you wouldn't give your very new students something very difficult for them that they're not equipped in their knowledge and skills or their ability to work with each other, how to reflect or regulate. You've got to measure those things. And often we do that, I suppose, by year level in our work. Like first years have a special place of that understanding. But by the time they get to the end, which we often use capstones, that professional sort of transition, that might be where you add more. But I wouldn't say that's the only place that you can use it. You could be able to use authentic assessment across every course to some degree.
Okay, Padlet?
Yes.
Okay, first activity, let's brainstorm some authentic assessment types. So if you would like to join on your phone, there's a QR code there, and I will put the link in the chat as well, so that you can join. Sorry, my dog.
Well, someone's a little puppy with us.
That's my dog. There we go. Link in the chat as well for you to join us there. And let's jump in. I'll leave that there for another 20 seconds or so. And you can still see my screen, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to switch over now to the Padlet. And we used a Padlet last time. Just to remind you how to use one, you can use double click anywhere on the screen if you'd like, and then type in what you think is an authentic assessment type. Or you can use this plus, which then becomes a pencil down here on the bottom right-hand side. And again, it's not a quiz. We're just, what do you think are authentic assessment types?
So I can see 5 people are typing something.
Yeah.
And Ray, you already had some in the chat. So I don't know if you're one of those 5, but yes, so deep learning.
And that's what we want to encourage, isn't it? Through authentic assessment, is to engage them in more deep learning. Exit ticket per module.
Oh, that, yes. What's a ticket? Exit ticket? Somebody help us out.
You're welcome to type in the chat or unmute if you're the exit ticket per module. So we see the student portfolio. Yes, that is an authentic assessment type. And I'll show you some examples of how we do that here, I get students to, how we use the portfolio to scaffold assessment practices, but ultimately how we also use the portfolio for students to create a professional portfolio of their best work and achievement, showing progressive development of learning outcomes and professional competencies. Case study, that's a good one.
So case studies come from the inquiry pedagogy set. So I've heard other people in the other workshops talk about problem-based learning, case studies, scenarios. All of that inquiry works very nicely in authentic assessment. Mind map, excellent. Yeah.
Oh yeah, good one.
I've forgotten about that.
Authentic assessment needs a realistic activity. That's right. That's one of the components, is realism, isn't it? For students, in order to be able to get them to connect on a more personal and deep level. And that encourages them to learn more as well. So we'll show you about adding context, adding a scenario. Reflection and sharing of insights, absolutely. Performances, yes, somebody who's works in the arts, or where else would we see performances? But yeah, drama and art. Podcasts, that's a good one. What's another one that's along the podcast, but the written version, a sequence of activities? I was thinking blogs. I see portfolios are really great for blogs, as students prepare students for authentic writing that they're going to use in their professional careers, or as a side gig, learning how to write blogs. Heaps in there. Look at all of them. Once you get rolling, you start to
role play.
Yeah.
Storyboard. Videos. Yes. Now that's something that's quite useful and easy for the students now. If they have a phone or access to a phone, it's much easier than it used to be.
Yeah. Treasure hunting, reading hunting. That sounds cool. I'm going to take that course. Oh, here we go. So exit ticket per module. The ePortfolio is divided in modules and ends by asking the students 3 questions to be answered in a short essay type. For example, what have you learned from this module? What more would you like to learn? Do you have any other questions? Absolutely, as a way to gauge their level of understanding and maybe identify any gaps in their understanding to help inform your teaching practices. Anything else in there, Christine? Should we keep going? There's the blog.
I think we'll just store that. So we're happy to move on. But
yeah, that's great. Great.
It's some really good ideas there. It sounds like you're using quite a lot. And I guess that leads us to the next slide, really, is some myths. This is a very old, like you would consider old paper, 1993, but from Cronin. But I found this really useful in break myth busting. I don't know, you have shows on TV where they break myths and stuff. And I guess there's 4 myths in this paper that really I'd like to talk about. So if we just press for number 1. So this is the first one. Authentic and non-authentic assessment is a binary concept. You can have one or the other. You know, so I'm not an authentic assessment educator, you might think. But that is actually not true, because the answer to that is, I would say, if you bring it up, is we have a continuum of practice. So just from that Padlet, you've shown us things that you understand as, I'm trying to get that bing off my thing, so sorry about that. I thought I'd turn off notifications, but they're coming on. So Shari, if you can send me something to tell me how to get the notifications out of Teams, that would be great. Because I'm getting all of these bings. So, but we need to see our practice as a continuum. So we'll never be perfectly authentic assessment people and educators and non-authentic. So we're all doing something already, I would suggest, that makes us in the authentic category. So it's not a big milestone that we have to jump over to become that. I would suggest you're already that. The next one, you must master the concept of authentic assessment before you can use it. Well, no, you might need some understanding, for example. So the next one, Shari, I've just you've just shown you've had some experience with authentic assessment concepts. So the idea of what we're trying to achieve is all you really need to start. You just need to be careful, I guess, a bit of wisdom in practice, that don't jump to the third one, which I believe is, it has to be exciting and creative and fun. And if it's not that way, it's not authentic. Well, that's not true either. Now, if you think about real world, when you go to work, not everything's original, creative and fun. And I was telling Shari about the story in my discipline of urban planning about an educator who had the job of teaching the students the system, like the computer system that they had to use to collect data. And they always used to think it was terrible. But 2 years later down the track, when they've actually used it in professional practice, they come back and go, oh, I'm so thankful that you actually did that for us, because, it was so helpful in practice. So it can be fun, it can be creative, and obviously it can be original, but it doesn't have to be. So what you need to consider is authentic means what relates to those professions or what you want the students to learn. Because there's a lot of things that come into this. If you make it very creative and fun, think about sustainable workload that we talked about before. You have to design this, you have to make it, and then the students have to do it, and then you have to mark it. It could be huge. Now, is the value of using that particular authentic style what you need? Or is it just the fact of just revising what you've got and turning something into a more scenario-based? So this decision-making is really important in authentic assessment design. We just want something that helps the students progress into that deeper learning, into that lifelong learning. And we need to think about those other factors that come into that as well. And the last one, I think, is all authentic tasks are complex and elaborate, not simple and straightforward. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Perhaps in the capstone and in an ePortfolio at the end, it might be becoming more complex and elaborate because you've got a whole, I don't know, a degree or a whole course's task there. But that's not a criteria for authentic assessment. It can be simple and straightforward. So I think what we're about today in this workshop is looking for obvious opportunities that we have existing, or maybe relatively easy for us to actually make more authentic without sort of taking, I think we need a picture there of a guy jumping off a cliff or something, because you don't actually have to go that far to make things more authentic. Thanks, Shari. Questions? There's Ray again. What will happen when the university has a standardized assessment to implement? Yes, so are you thinking like standardized curriculum? Yes, that's one of the complaints I've heard is how can faculty make it more original and creative? I guess it depends on your system. do you get the same assessment tasks that you have to use in that curriculum, Ray, or is it some flexibility there for you to be creative?
Yeah, there are policies, university policy that maybe standards in terms of instruction, and
Yes, yeah, we
and
do have that in
somehow
the
it's
K-12.
been written in the manual, something like that, and we have
Yeah.
this accreditation, and deviation from what written in the manual could be a downside or a negative on the part
Yeah.
of the teacher.
Yeah, yeah. So
How the
yes.
faculty could be able to come up with its creativity if the university has this policy that
Yes.
you have to abide.
I mean, I think that's a very good question, because I know our K-12 here has fairly, well, it's rigorous and standardized, obviously higher education. I mean, sorry, a high school curriculum, for example, because they're going to be all tested across the whole state or Australia, whatever it is, you know.
Christine, it reminded me of the Dead Poets Society movie.
Mm-hmm. With Robin Williams.
The teacher go beyond the class, you know.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
The classroom class. Yeah, something like that, you know.
Yeah,
it reminds me.
So one thing I did notice was in that curriculum that was standardized, fortunately, the curriculum developers were quite authentic in some of the things that I've seen. So that helps. What if your accrediting body, and I do know of some who says that you have to have all the exams for whatever reason. What do you do with that? Well, part of it can be the style of how you create those exams, how the format, and we will look at that. There's ways you can make that more authentic. So I guess we're not leaping. Remember, we're on the continuum. So we can't make them, you know, go out of the class and do X for this. Maybe we can for a learning activity that's not actually like a field trip, but it's not immediately evaluated. But there are things you can do also to exams and things like that to make them more authentic for those students. So I guess we're not saying authentic or not authentic. We have to sort of work in the middle ground, which helps us push towards being more authentic. But, you know, maybe we're not completely happy with that, but it's at least more authentic. And one of a group activity I'm going to ask you to do is something, you inherit something. You know, as a teacher, we inherit some curriculum from someone else even that had it the year before, and you look at the assessment, you think, oh my goodness. And how can you actually work with that until you can get to change it? How can you do things within your power to make that more authentic? Good question. There is a ways you can do that. Do we have any other questions, Shari?
There was a question earlier in the chat. Cheryl asked, how do we know if the designed authentic assessment is effective? We test the effectiveness.
In what sort of way?
Cheryl, what do you think? What do you mean in terms of the students
Learning?
liking it, or did students learning?
Yeah,
or so that was earlier. She asked that.
Hello everyone. Yes,
hello Cheryl.
Hi everyone. So I'm sorry I cannot open my camera. I'm outside actually, but I am interested. For example, I understand that to create an impactful assessment or authentic assessment is you have to design it well. Now, I would like to know how will I measure if the assessment that I have designed is truly effective and it's truly authentic in the sense that it creates a positive impact to the learning of my students.
Yeah, okay, so linking assessment design to student learning is always can be complicated. Obviously, if all your students are failing, you may have to consider that there's something wrong with the assessment task. I mean, that's just the cold face of it. I think if it's meeting your learning outcome of what you wanted to achieve, and you find the students have taken that and understood it and understand what the task was about and how to respond, I think, and that would demonstrate in their marks of what they actually get for it. I think it would also measure in their inquiry as they're going through the process of doing the assessment task. So that's what Shari, engagement is some level of evaluation. If you really wanted something more formal, you could actually research that and do a little project where it actually asks the students, so from their perspective, was the design of that assessment task useful in achieving whatever it was you wanted them to learn? There are ways of doing that. So if you need formal things, yes, you can research it. Sometimes students complain about authentic assessment because it's maybe more work or they don't understand it. I've heard recently students in a class I was in that said, oh, you know, we understand how to do essays because we've got that down pat. And now you're asking us to do X. I now have to get my head around that more, how to do that. So they might not be happy about it, but that's not a good evaluation of the fact that this is actually something they need for this degree. They need to learn how to do. So therefore, successfully completing that type of task is in its way telling you that it's working. Does that help at all?
Yes, it was truly helpful. I understand that for me to assess it is to know if my design is truly effective is to go back to the fundamentals, if the authentic assessment really achieves the learning outcome that I set in the first place. And
yes,
I like the suggestion that you have, that if I want it to be more formal, I have to do research about it, like in such manner that I can measure it well. Yeah, thank you so much.
That's all right. And the other thing I'd say, Shari, is don't make necessarily everything in your course authentic assessment. You don't have to make them all at the same, you know, to a high level of authenticity. Pick the major one or pick the thing that's most important. Anyway.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, we better move on.
Okay, and then we can come back to that question. There's another big question in there that Greg has put in there. So we'll come back to that.
Right.
Okay, so next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about transforming assessment to be more authentic, and I'll show you some examples, and we'll revisit ePortfolio uses and the benefits of using ePortfolios. So you might remember this slide from our last webinar seminar that Christine and I did. So starting from up here, the underpinning of ePortfolio practice usually is critical thinking in terms of reflection over time, where students are able to see and reflect on their growth and development of achievement of learning outcomes throughout a period. And that could be program wide if you were to set up the ePortfolio past one subject. Assessment, we predominantly see ePortfolio use for assessment, both formative and summative. Self-regulated learning, ePortfolios promote the reworking and uptake of feedback, which we spoke about before, and that can help increase self-regulation skills of learning of students. Social learning, peer-to-peer learning, it's students working in groups and then documenting that process in their portfolios. So another use. In addition to critical thinking skills, other high order thinking skills like increasing communication, making judgments around the quality of their work and the work of others, that's called evaluative judgment, and demonstrating competency or achievement of competency. And that could be, in the case of professional degrees, professional competencies, which I will show you an example of that in dietetics. Professional development, we use ePortfolios as teachers as well for in-service teaching, and again, doing all the above things we just talked about and documenting our growth and development, our reflections over time. Employability is a really big one for students to reflect on how they're becoming more employable in terms of after graduation. And showcase, students can create a product of all their best work in a showcase, or ideally would be scaffolded through a program so that they can see their learning and development and how they learn and why they learn, and create a web page, and they could use that outward facing in terms of presenting it to future employers. And another one, which you've seen some research come out on, we can reposition ePortfolios to curate feedback. And this is how I like to use portfolios, is for students to incorporate feedback from internal and external sources, themselves and their peers. There we go. So curate feedback is that last one. So I'd like to talk about the benefits of ePortfolios. And one of them is that portfolios can facilitate or enable us to design assessment sequences and multi-stage tasks. Let's look at some examples of those. So perhaps in your course, you might do a series of lab reports where students, it might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 lab reports or various sequences of assessment items. Again, where you would have a feedback cycle in between each one, and they promote that the uptake of that feedback because they're going to use it in that next assessment coming up. What about where students have to construct a YouTube video of them performing a skill? It could be making slime or how to fold origami. And then they give that video to a peer or a friend for them to learn that skill based on that video. And they do an observation watching how well that video works. And then based on how well it didn't go, they might do an action plan. Again, we can do all this in an ePortfolio. And here's one that I'm going to unpack a little bit further in a minute. Perhaps you give students an authentic assessment that starts with a scenario, some context in your course, and students need to research the topic and create an annotated bibliography. And so that's their first task. Then they need to write a commentary, a short written piece where they justify the different types of research that they're going to use in this particular assessment. And then they write a report, and they can put that in their ePortfolio as well. And then maybe the final piece is an authentic piece of learning, like a pamphlet or a leaflet, where students might do that in another tool, but then put that in their portfolio. And so through this, not only are they curating evidence of learning in their portfolio, but they're also able, don't forget, to curate feedback. Remember, Christine and I spoke about creating these feedback spirals where in this case, we have a lab report and they receive some feedback, engage in some feedback, and then they make some changes going forward into that next lab report, and there's impact there. And so they have more feedback and they make some changes, and each time they're improving and getting better and reworking and learning. And ePortfolio is the perfect place to do this in. So Christine spoke about why we use authentic assessment, and one of the reasons is to encourage students to engage in that deeper learning. And I know that was captured in the Padlet as well, deeper learning and more productive learning. How can we drive students' interest and have them have a desire to learn more about the subject? So here's an example that I've taken from Sally Brown and Kay Samble's work. We are going to give you this webpage. They have after COVID, they constructed a website of a multitude of resources of alternatives to exams and tests, and how to transform assessment to make them more authentic. So I've taken one from there, and this is instead of an essay in biological sciences. So here's the essay question. Let's have a read of this. Outline the principal physiological changes that a subject deprived of water and a hot climate would experience, describing the effect of dehydration on the body and how the homeostatic mechanisms of the body would try to retain water and regulate the body temperature in a hot climate. Okay, so an essay. What's missing from here? How could we provide a more authentic experience? So first of all, let's look at context. Is there any context of here? No, there's no context. We spoke about powerful driving verbs as well. So here we've got outline. That's not a very high order thinking verb, and describe. So again, we probably want to look at changing those. And ultimately, what do we want students to produce? What could they produce instead of an essay? What do we want the authentic artifacts of learning to be? The idea behind creating authentic assessments is breaking down this single rigid assessment item into a number of subtasks, which encourages more, again, personal connections to the tasks and engaging end products, which are applicable to the real world. So here's what we could do. Provide a scenario, context, higher order thinking skills, includes a multiple touch points for feedback that enables the teacher to go in and have a look and monitor their development and check. And again, as Cheryl asked, how do we know it's been effective? Well, if we break it down, then we'll be able to help them along the way. Engaging end products that are real world. And again, the portfolio is the perfect place to do this in. So this is the before. The essay is the before. Let's look at the after now. Here's a scenario. So here's something you could give students. We've got some photos to help provide some context. I'm going to read this. So 52-year-old Amanda Barnes went missing for 2 weeks in the Australian outback near Alice Springs. Okay, so there's Alice Springs. She and her friends and Dana and Genoa were on an afternoon 4-wheel drive across the outback headed towards Stewart's Well down here. During the drive, their car got bogged in mud and could not move. Amanda stayed with the car while the others tried to walk and get some help. Left alone with the car and the isolated outback, Amanda dug a hole underneath the car to provide some shelter during the scorching daytime temperature of 40 degrees, typical outback, hey? And so she slept in the vehicle at night when the temperature dropped down to 25 degrees. Okay, let's look at some more context to help get ready for the task. So Amanda had limited food and water to drink. Initially, she drank 2 liters of bottled water in the car, but when she ran out, she drank some dirty water collected from puddles. The only food she had was biscuits and dry noodles. After 10 days, supplies ran out. She was left in the car and sent to find shelter and water, leaving a note in the vehicle. She wandered several days in the outback, eventually stumbled across a cattle drinking hole where she later was found by police. And she was airlifted to hospital, suffering the effects of dehydration, exhaustion, and starvation. So again, I've taken this directly from Sally Brown and Kay Sample's webpage from there. There's lots of examples for you to check out. This is a real case. This happened. So this is something you can do. Have a look at the media. Find something you think that students are interested in. You can bring that into your task. And that's going to help students connect to it and drive, and they want to learn more about it. And so the task. So what's the task? So remember in the original essay, we need students to, we want them to learn about the effect of dehydration on the body, how the homeostatic mechanisms of the body would try to retain water, regulation of body temperature in the hot climate, and what happens to our bodies in heat exhaustion. So here's that task. So first, we're going to make them do some research on the topic. And again, we're going to make them do that with that annotated bibliography. And then they can write a short commentary next, justifying why they chose those resources. And then they can write a report. So that's the meaty bit. That's maybe 1,500 words. They have to write a report documenting everything as I just said, all the effects on the body. And then they're going to ultimately produce this authentic piece of work, a pamphlet. And this is what it looks like. The pamphlet leaflet for travelers contains advice on staying safe, who they should have in terms of equipment, what they should have in terms of equipment before setting off, and who to contact in case of emergency. We've broken down that essay, which was quite boring, into 4 things that the students need to do. Let's look at those powerful cognitive verbs. We're researching, we're explaining, we're evaluating, and we're creating. Yeah, so we completely transformed that assessment to something that's really cool. And we're going to do that in the portfolio. But don't forget the feedback process. Within each one of these assessments, we can provide some feedback. Now, it doesn't always have to be the teacher feedback. Christine and I spoke before about positioning students as active participants in that feedback process. There could be some self-evaluations, some peer feedback. You could provide some external information for them to compare to. So again, they're generating their own feedback for themselves. And so we spoke about this last time, active participants in that feedback process, where students understand the importance of it, they value being active participants, they learn to self-evaluate and compare feedback, and are aware of their role to action feedback. And our job as educators, we need to design the assessment tasks to enable students to make those judgments, remember the quality of their work and the work of others, and use that feedback and increase feedback uptake, and guide students in composing and receiving that peer feedback, if you can do that as well. So we think about not only authentic assessment, but authentic feedback processes. And I'm going to show you some of those as well. Okay, so because my polls aren't working, I'm going to just read this out for you. And I would like you in the chat to answer this, please. Okay, do you currently use authentic assessment in your teaching? I'd like you to answer yes, and it's gone really well. Yes, but it could be improved. No, you haven't used authentic assessment, but you plan to. And no, absolutely not. I don't use authentic assessment because it doesn't fit in my discipline. So do you use authentic assessment currently? Let's have a look. Gary says yes. Ray says yes. No surprise, Ray. Yes,
Capstone projects. Yeah.
Yes. Look at this. There's no no's, Christine. Yes, but it could be improved a lot. That's why we're here. It's not going to be perfect at the beginning. We're here to learn more and how to do this. I mean, I'm always reading about various authentic assessment types and always getting better with practice. So yeah, yes, but it can be improved. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Ray. That's fantastic. Thanks for your honesty there as well. Instead of everybody saying, yes, it's perfect.
We won't believe that because we know that we can't do that either.
No.
It's like a rubric. It's always going to be not quite perfect.
Yeah, and all the designs that I do when I work as a learning designer with academics across UQ, I call it it's an iterative learning design process, you know, where we evaluate it, how it went, we get the student evaluations and how they thought it went, and then we change it, and we're always learning more with new educational resource. So it's an iterative process of constantly refining and changing your tasks.
Yeah,
So,
parents complaining about the grading.
Ah, really?
Yeah, maybe I think actually we had that last time with the digital ethics that we need to educate parents as well on what is, you know, a solid learning process for their children, that it's not just the marks. I understand the pressures of that, but
and around your assessment strategy and the outcomes you're hoping to achieve. I mean, yeah, that's right. Communicating that to the parents is really important.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought of that. That's all right.
Well, fortunately in higher education, we don't have to do that, but it's an important part of K-12. Excellent.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. So next we have our group activity. So don't go anywhere. Again, Christine said this is a safe place, a safe learning place. So what I'm going to do is put this up. Christine, I'll hand over to you to explain it.
Yeah.
And start to get the groups ready.
Yes, so we're just going to do random groups. So we've got 33, so we can have some nice smaller slides, maybe 4 to 5. Now, it looks complicated here, but it isn't really. It's just actually a bit of a brainstorm about improving authenticity in assessment tasks. So I'm thinking back over my own experience. I've been assigned courses to teach that have types of assessment that I don't particularly not just like, but they don't resonate with my values and beliefs about teaching. So, but I don't necessarily have time to change them all straight away because the semester's about to start, you know, and I've just got the course, and it would be a huge workload to change them all, for example, straight away. So that's one part of this, is that I might just have to make these tasks more authentic by revision. Otherwise, I might be given a whole new course and say, oh, you can do whatever. So how would I, you know, make these tasks more authentic, and I can actually design them. So this scenario is I've got given these 3 existing types of tasks, and I'd like to make them more real world and have the students use higher order thinking skills. So remember, again, I'm not making a moral judgment about multiple choice tests. In some circumstances, that's fine. But in my course that I've got now, this scenario, I want to change that. So I want to change it from being a multiple choice test where students just memorize facts and, for example, true, false, what's the one right answer, fill in the blank. That's not going to be suitable for my course. The second one is the one Shari's already said, which is an essay, which just says, describe what happens to a body when it doesn't get enough water, basically, or starves. You know, tell me about the process of, I don't know, going shopping, or just for younger children, or spending money, or whatever it is. So to me, I want to beef that up and make it more challenging for the students' learning. Or the third one, which is quite common, is the invigilated 3-hour written exam. So they're either on some proctoring system online, or they're actually in a room and they're asked for 3 hours to write something, a short answer question. could be little snippets of stuff they've learnt during the semester, or they have to write mini essays. So fairly common types of assessment tasks: multiple choice, the essay, the descriptive essay, or the invigilated 3-hour written exam. Okay, so your task in the breakout rooms is how, and this is going to be, you know, in a group, so you've got to be thinking about how could I make those 3 types of tasks more authentic. Now, you can't see this slide when you're in the breakout room, I don't believe. So you might want to just jot down those 3 types of tasks, or if you've got your phone with you, take a picture of this slide so you can have that to reference in your breakout room. Now, there's some instructions to go with this. 1, take a copy of the slide. We're doing that. 2, breakout rooms, we want you to decide who's going to record what the group agrees to do. Okay, so we're going to have a time after this, a very short time, where each group will report back for 1 minute. So that's the challenge. You've only got 1 minute to tell the rest of the group, the whole group, the whole workshop group, what you decided to do. So to do that, we need somebody to write that down or type that into a computer. So we've got a record. And you need to then pick another person who's going to be that spokesperson that's going to actually talk for the minute. Now, be happy to volunteer. You know, take a risk. If you haven't done it before, take a risk and just see if you want to do one of those tasks. And then you need to decide what those things are that you're going to change. You've got 10 minutes to do that. And then we'll have the 1 minute after. Now, I just want to show the next slide, Shari, before we go to the breakout rooms, because I realize, and it's a bit hard to see, but you may be, of course, familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. And we had discussions about this, Shari and I. There's plenty of different versions. But what I want you to have a very quick look at is that tiny little bit of print up above where Shari's got the mouse. See, knowledge and comprehension is the low level thinking skills. So they're okay, but that's where we are probably in our task that I'm asking you to change. And if you go up the other end to the green, purple, blue, analysis, synthesis, that's where we've got the students in the higher order thinking skills. So that's this is a neat way to think about what you might want to change. It hasn't got the assessment types in there for you, but at least it gives you an idea of the types of things you might want those students to actually be doing. So moving from just comprehension to analysis, moving from knowledge to evaluation. I've given you the link there, so when you get the slides, you can use this. It's not the only one, but what I like about this is it's got lots of resource for verbs, questions and things you can use. And it actually comes from the teacher planning kit K-12, so a useful resource. Any questions before we drift you off into breakout rooms?
So there's gonna be 5 rooms.
Okay.
Christine, I'll put you in one, and I'll jump into one as well and help facilitate this.
Okay.
I'll time us as well. I'll give us a 1 minute warning. We might only do about 9 minutes because I've got some examples that I want to show everybody still.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm creating the rooms now.
Okay, so we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Welcome back, everybody. Just wait for everybody else to get back. I had some great conversations in room number 5.
Well, welcome back, everyone.
Yep, looks like everybody's back.
That went really quickly.
I know it did, and Gary had so many ideas, and he was telling me so much and elaborating. Gary, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to close the rooms.
All right,
Okay.
so we'll start. Will we just go through the room? So you've shown your spokesperson ready. Now, 1 minute goes real quick, and we are going to cut you off in 1 minute. Bye, Ray.
Who was in group 1? Should we start with that?
Yeah.
Shari, before I leave, because it's a lunch break.
Okay, Ray.
two-step.
raise group. Yeah,
And-
yeah. Sorry, I was.
Yeah, you go ahead.
The only thing that I in group 4, one is attending a meeting and he just want to listen and watch, and I'm only the one there, and the
Oh,
two
well.
were did not reply, did not respond.
That was easy to agree then, wasn't it?
So I came back to the main room.
Okay, so 4. Okay.
Yeah, but I did not really, I even in the main room did not catch with their discussion. But anyway, I wish I could listen to the first assessment.
Okay, so you going now, and you could listen
Yes,
to
yeah.
the recording. This will be on it.
Okay.
Okay, bye then.
Thank you.
So group 1, who's the spokesperson for group 1, breakout room 1?
Hello, it's
Yay,
it's
Ray.
me.
Okay,
Yeah.
You've got 1 minute.
So
Off you go.
go. What did you
All right. So
decide?
our group was actually from a diverse specialization. So we decided that our course would be about science, and we selected the topic ecosystem. So the project, it's going to be a project-based assessment, and our assessment would be like a portfolio where students, it's a group project where students will have to include in their portfolio the pictures and videos of how they work together to accomplish the project. And it should be scheduled. There should be a timeline. And another suggested that there should be a rubrics for that, including the documentations. And there is also a suggestion that it should include scheduling. And I also suggested that there should be a reflective journal entries. Each of the members of the group will have to create or to jot down or to present their journal entries, which is in a reflective format. And lastly, the portfolio assessment will also include agreement as to how their projects will be assessed. So students will be asked how they would like their projects to be rated or scored. So I think that was our almost.
Wow, you
8
did well in 10 minutes
That's
to
a
get
lot.
all of
Oh,
that.
thank you.
Well done, group 1. Okay, 2. Nina Floor?
I am
No,
from
you're
group 1
clapping.
also, Ma'am
I nearly
Christie.
dobbed you in to speak.
I'm also from group 1. We're with Sir Ray.
Yes, we're together.
Okay, so where's group 2's spokesperson hiding? You're losing your time. Anybody from group 2 want to do the 1 minute? No? Okay, 3. Now I was in that group, so I know who the spokesperson is. Mel?
It's Marites.
Go. You probably don't know what group you were. Okay, off you go. You've got a minute.
Marites, take it away.
Okay, sir. So this is for group,
Oh, okay.
our group.
Okay.
So what I have written here. Yes, I'm Christine.
Okay, well, which one of you is speaking?
Okay, I'll be the one to
Good.
share our discussion.
Good
So
on you.
with regards to multiple choice, we can make it authentic in terms of being guided by the solo framework and by the revised Bloom taxonomy, wherein all answers are correct. The learner should just choose the best option, and each option have a corresponding point. So these options are all correct answer. And then for essay, as Sir Mel have said, it should be a contextualized scenario, and it usually uses understanding by design, which is more of an explanatory work for learners. And then we also have the as suggested is the rubrics for or criteria for essay writing. and this should be contextualized so that learners can relate to what the topic will be given to learners.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Veritas. Okay, 4 we've had. Is there a 5?
Thank
group,
you.
Shari?
Yes, there is a 5, and it's going to be a combination of 2 people.
It'll have to be
Cheryl.
1 minute.
Yeah, really fast, guys. So Cheryl, you're up first, and then we hand over.
Thank you so much. So for group 5, we chose to brainstorm all of the given existing tasks and how we can transform it into authentic assessment. So first, for multiple choice tests, instead of giving questions that are based on memorization of facts, why not give a situation or scenario-based questions where students can choose the best answer from the possible courses of action. Number 2 is the essay. Instead of having the students write a very lengthy essay, why not assign a task that would require students to conduct a research around a certain topic and create an infographic. Now, with me here is my partner, Gary Gray, to talk about his brilliant idea on how to create authentic assessment for written exam. Gary?
What we do in the Ateneo Graduate School of Business, since most of our students are working students in their respective offices, I divide my class into 5 groups of 5 students each, since there are around 25 students. And each group chooses a company within their group to report on a final paper, with the format of identifying what is the vision, mission, objectives of the company, what are the SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the company. And since my course is an information technology course, what are the possible IT tools or concepts that can be applied to solve your identified problem. And then there's a portion for doing a cost-benefit analysis of the identified solution. And then, are there any ethical implications, especially in today's world of technology? There might be work displacement and also unethical use of artificial intelligence, etc. And finally, nation building implications. How can you help build the company, the community that the company serves, which ties up with the university goals?
Excellent. We'll have to cut there, Gary, but that is an excellent assessment task. Thanks everyone for participating. I just wanted to leave a few minutes for Shari just to show you a few examples. So sorry to cut you all off, but we did warn you. I don't like doing it, but we just want to show you just a very brief examples, and then it's time for us to finish. Just to plug, you do this first, Shari, but just to plug, to say there is one more workshop on professional learning or professional development that will be coming up. Right, off you go, Shari.
Good. Okay, I'm going to skip the first one. So these are some examples of portfolios at UQ. I'm going to skip this one, just so I can spend a little bit more time talking about this one. So this is, sorry, was there an intro slide? Occupational therapy, sorry, multi-stage design. And then I'm just going to skip to, there's that rubric as well. One of the benefits of ePortfolios, in addition to being able to do multi-stage tasks and multi-design, breaking that task down into smaller sub-chunks, is being able to help students realize who they're becoming. And Christine spoke all about authentic assessment, but Rola Jawi and her colleagues in 2020 in a book, and that'll be in our resources. She argues that to be considered authentic assessment, the processes should engage the whole person to integrate what students know, how they act, and how they are. And what better way than to get students to create a professional portfolio, a web page showing off all of their achievements, but also their process of learning, their development of learning. So there's heaps of examples online you can find. All of these portfolios I found using the Wix site. And that's a free portfolio tool down here. And there's heaps of them out there that you can pull up and have a look and see whether that fits into your context. So incorporating ePortfolio showcase in the curriculum provides students with that opportunity to create that authentic representation of their self-identity with their achievements and evidence of learning. And like something that you were talking about, Gary, with getting students to go through that authentic scenario and producing all these artifacts of learning, it's great to get them to put them all in one place and reflect on that and reflect on their achievements so that when they are able to go out into the workplace, perhaps seeking another position, because your students are already in a job, but when they're seeking other positions, then they've got this curated portfolio and they're ready, job ready, interview ready. There's a whole bunch there. This other example I want to show you is within the Master of Dietetics. The Master of Dietetics is a 2-year program at the University of Queensland. And the program highlights have taken from the website. They want their students to be confident, job ready. They have 850 hours of fully supervised industry placements. So it's heavily involved in work integrated learning in their on-campus clinics, as well as in external hospitals and clinics. And so they want their students to be able to integrate their theory and practical experiences from their first semester throughout the entire program. And so the ePortfolio can be this vessel. It supports the integration of learning through, we talked about employability outcomes, professional competencies, as in the case of the Master of Dietetics, graduate attributes, and your course learning outcomes. So again, it supports that integration of learning, acts like a vessel. We can funnel that through. And the Master of Dietetics are involved with the National Competency Standards for Dietitian in Australia. So in this design, this ePortfolio design, we ensured that all the tasks were going to help students articulate their development of competencies against these competency standards. And this is part of that portfolio. So this is just a snippet of it within one course. So what we could do in the first year of the program is we get them to initiate this professional portfolio showcase that I just spoke about. And we've given them a framework to start off on. So we've got an About Me page. We've broken down those national competency standards into their domains. There's 4 domains around practices professionally, expert practice, etc. We've got a page in there for them to integrate their previous working experience. They can put their CV in there, and as well as a personal page. The personal page isn't part of their assessment, but that's where they can celebrate their distinctiveness and what makes them special and separate from the other students, what makes them stand out. And the last one really quickly to finish us off is the Master of Pharmaceutical Industry Practice. This one, we have students engage in authentic assessment practices of the workplace. They have a series. Again, here's this task series. This one's a reflective task series. And the reflections are scaffolded according to the scenarios that they might see out on placement, from challenges to their communication, to teamwork, to digital technologies. And then we give them a reflective framework called the SEAL reflective framework, where they write out situation, effect, action, and the learning is captured in a video. And the videos capture the excitement about their progress. You can hear it in their voices as they go through, and they're learning so much on placement. And they also help support this creation of a self-identity, transitioning from the student to professional. And the program lead, Associate Professor Peter Cabot, he has said that the learning through this assessment design is massive. The way they talk about themselves, how they're trying to improve, they understand so much more about themselves. So there's something else to consider, is a reflective task series embedded in the program. If you've got some work integrated learning, they do some evaluations and a feedback action plan and a final performance evaluation as well. So there's that final example. Sorry, I went through that so quickly. We'll provide you with the slides and feel free to ask us any questions. Anything else, Christine?
So thanks everyone for participating today and having a go in the breakout rooms and hearing about some of the work you're doing. It's fantastic. It'd be great to be able to do some more of that interaction. We have one more session in the series of 4 about professional development, which is more really for you, I think, as a teacher, and using an ePortfolio to actually help facilitate your learning and reflection, etc., for your own development. And that will be in a couple of weeks' time. And the three of us, Christine Brown-Wilson from Ireland and Shari and I, will all be involved in that. There is one gap that I would, and I'm not quite sure how to fill it out, is that we haven't heard about your projects. And I'm mindful that Nan said you were creating projects for using an ePortfolio. So perhaps that's something we can throw out to Nan to suggest how we could actually maybe see some of those projects or have some time to actually look at them and to be able to help you with that. So that's probably something I'll bring up with her when we talk with her next. But until then, 2 weeks' time, and we'll be back to talk to you and to share with you about the other professional development topic and ePortfolio. So happy ePortfolio. Sorry, we have no more time for questions, but keep them and bring them up next time.
Yes.
So,
and we will provide you with all those resources here as well. So this is a really great webpage to check out. Heaps of resources there around authentic assessment.
So thanks, everybody. We'll check in again later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.